Hi, my name's Bob Greenyer, and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. So, welcome this beautiful Thursday, the 2nd of May 2024, when we will be discussing O-Day Control. So, can everyone hear me? Hi, Artifact. Hi, Space Panda 369. Great name. Elusive 323. Hi, Malcolm, Alex Del Castillo, Scott Jobson. Yes, thank you for confirming that. Hi, Nathan Ford. Hi, Corky Goss is in the house. Richard Lovett, Phil Dubois. Hello very much. Happy to see you. Jacoby 6000 is here also. Overwhelmed Games, JPS Afudimo. Anna Witkowski, Scott Jobson. Then Isis, Nick Knock. Earthworm Jim. Matthew Reynolds, Ken Pratt, Craig, wow, Gaiazyme. It is fantastic to have you all here. Well, many moons ago, one Stoyansag here, an atmospheric scientist from Bulgaria who defected from the Soviet Union, or I think he went to Cuba and then he went to Canada and ended up teaching for his career at Toronto University. He came and visited me and gave me this book on December the 6th, 2014. He stayed at my house for about 3 days. We became good friends and we have spoken regularly since. Anyway, this is his theory, the basic structures of matter, supergravitation, unified theory, and it was him that, I guess, gave me my first thoughts about resonating plasmas and producing something interesting. Anyway, he said to me, those many, well, actually, I think it was later, probably around about 2016, he said to me, Bob, if you work out Lena, I will give you anti-gravity. And of course, if you've been following me, I've said that I thought that literally for many years, that literally he would give me the secrets to anti-gravity if I worked out how Lena worked. Of course, now I realize they are, in my view, are intimately connected. And so you literally get the other for free. I prefer to call it propulsion. But as we will see in some media I have from recent days, tornadoes in the US, it's very interesting. I think with the current storm chasers, terrible risking your lives like that, but with the kind of quality of media they are producing, I think we can get a very good idea of what is going on in this process if we understand what maybe the rotas sator square meaning, as we spoke the other day, that it is, in my view, the divine creator comprehends and works with whirlwinds. Okay, so we have been deriving that over many, many moons. And actually, he contacted me because he was running a small conference. I couldn't do it because I was over in the UK helping Malcolm. I couldn't really participate. But we touched base again, and he shared his new website with me. And if you give me a sec, I will just pull that up. And it's it's, to be fair, it's very Web 1. You'll know what I mean when you see it. Here we go. And he was the person that told me a long time ago, or rather he produced a video of it and we discussed it, that if you had two nuclear weapons set off on either side of the equator, it would set up a system that would strip the atmosphere of its gases. And then the oceans would boil, and that would be the end of planet Earth. And this has never happened before. You've never had two modern-size nuclear weapons being detonated at the same time. Thank the Lord. Right. Now, Partly the reason I'm talking about what I want to talk about tonight is that we've got a never-ending disease, we've got a never-ending climate problem, and I think both of those are basically fake. And I've come to the conclusion after much soul-searching, and I think the last thing that really is fake, but is engineered, is a never-ending war. And I genuinely thought that we had an opportunity to break from this multi-decade obsession with having a permanent war going on, with what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq and so forth. But we didn't get a very big hiatus, did we? And I was absolutely appalled with the thought that maybe stimulated Stoyan to reach out to me, because he's in Bulgaria, and Bulgaria is very close to a current warring location. And it seems there are those that are intent on not putting an end to the dying, but are putting in place a determined effort to keep the dying going for a decade. And this may not be something that is of concern too much to people that live a long way away, but when you don't live very long way away from where this determined effort to keep people dying is going on, you know, you can think about it a little bit more on a daily basis. And when that, you know, one of the parties, and in fact both of the parties effectively, and in fact multiple parties to this dying process, possess nuclear weapons, it kind of focuses the mind. But of course, I do believe that there are solutions to these nuclear weapons that we have had for a long time. And that part of the never-ending war and the never-ending threat of a nuclear war is itself fake. And so it's like, you know, choose your lies. How many lies do you want to live with for your entire life, and live and be oppressed by and be subjugated by a raft of lies? Well, I'm more interested in using aspects of this technology to deliver, whether it is clean exhaust or extra heat or removing nuclear waste or producing direct energy or propulsion. These are the things that I'm interested in, rather than perpetuating more killing. And so with that said, I was looking at his website, and I was not surprised to see this mock-up of a detonation over a major metropolis here. It is something that he is absolutely passionate about. And then I saw this declassified movie down here. And what I'm going to try and do is play that for you. And then we are going to look at some other things. And then we're going to come back to it. And I think you'll realize that these things are all related. And you therefore might get an idea of why there is such a determined effort to make sure that you, the plebs, the serfs, the tax slaves of the world, should not know there is a potential way to control and utilize this energy, or this technological gift of nature, this natural process, for things that might otherwise benefit you. So we'll just play the original video. Then I want to go and look at some Frank Palevka work and some other things, and then we'll come back and we'll look at some of the implications. Okay, so let me just pull up this video, and I will try and pass through the audio, which means I need to chuck in my earphones, otherwise you're all going to hear it twice. Excuse me. That's where it all goes wrong, because I've got a lot of things on my system today, and so that's when it sometimes freezes. So let's see if we can get through this without it going. Bleh. Okay. I will go in here. I need to do loop back. And I need to give you the audio from Premiere. Turn that on, and hopefully you will hear this. I don't want it on the speakers. Okay. Right. Give me a second, and we will be there. So here we go. Right, hopefully you will be able to hear this. It's quite loud, the first bit, so maybe I can dial that down. Oh no, it should be okay. Right, so this is this video.
This is an airburst of a typical nuclear weapon, exploded at a height of about 2,000 feet. The first observed effect is a brilliant flash of bluish-white light that overwhelms the vision of even distant observers. The ball of fire, an incandescent sphere of glowing gases whose internal temperature is measured in thousands of degrees, starts to climb into the sky. This particular fireball, a fraction of a second old, has an energy equivalent to 20,000 tons of conventional explosive.
Can you hear it now?
Its internal pressure is measured in thousands of pounds per square inch. This pulverizing shock wave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud, developing into the characteristic mushroom shape of a low-altitude burst. Losing brilliance rapidly, the fireball is colored an orange-brown by the release of oxides of nitrogen from the surrounding air.
Orange-brown.
Turbulent and still glowing, it shoots upward with an initial velocity of more than 100 miles per hour. The destruction caused by a relatively low-yield weapon can result in many square miles of ruins and account for thousands of human casualties. But how did it all come about? What caused this destruction? What can we do to increase the destructive effect? Or, conversely, how can we protect ourselves from it? Generally speaking, the main damaging effects of a nuclear weapon detonated within the atmosphere, this is caused by the air piling up against the building. A secondary but very important aspect of blast effects on buildings and structures is the number of exposed and unprotected persons who will be killed or injured by the flying debris produced by the passage of the blast wave. This blast wave has a double destructive effect in that it is lethal to not only city structures, but also to a city's people. In addition, anyone looking directly at a nuclear explosion may suffer permanent eye damage even at very large ranges.
Okay, so the annotations there were actually placed on this video by Stoyan Sarg. I didn't ask him to, he just sent that. And Sassy's asked, is the transmutation taking place? Clearly there is, or rather you would call it nuclear interactions. But the first thing he says here is anti-gravity effect. So let's go through it again.
This is an airburst of a typical nuclear...
So an airburst is... the reason you do an airburst with a nuclear weapon is if you do it on the ground, you don't get a very big destructive effect because it kind of basically goes up and... you know, it can only go out a little way. If you do it in the sky, you get a shockwave that comes down and does a lot more damage. Of course, you know, it's difficult to talk about these things. It's just bonkers that someone would do this. But anyway, that's what they do. You have an airburst, so you have it in the air, certain height up. Okay.
Your weapon exploded at a height of about 2,000 feet.
So 2,000 feet there.
The first observed effect is a brilliant flash of bluish.
Right, so already Stoyan-Sarg is noting that this is 2,000 foot in the air that it was detonated, yeah? And here he can already see there's things being pulled up from the ground. Pulled up from the ground.
White light that overwhelms the vision of even distant observers.
Look, so here there's a clear separation. This here looks almost identical to the hydrodynamic vortex and the depressurization below it that created the nanobubbles that I showed you in 2017. Pulling material up from the central
The ball
spot.
of fire. An incandescent sphere of
So they've gone in close here, and you can see that this bit that's been pulled up from the ground is nearly reaching the actual volume of the cloud here, the glowing cloud.
glowing gases whose internal temperature is measured in thousands of degrees.
Again, anti-gravity effect. I did not put that on there. That's Stoyan-Sarg. And just for context, Stoyan-Sarg has made a electro propulsion system based on his heterodyne resonance mechanism concepts. And he does these experiments on a pendulum and produces pulsed directional movement. And he is also one of the few people in the world that has replicated the Hutchison effect. It was by accident. It was with a solenoid, and he had inside that solenoid a ferrite core, and the event caused the ferrite core, which people that handle ferrite will know is quite brittle, like ceramic type stuff. Anyway, it bent smoothly. Anyway, to go ahead with his notation on these videos.
Starts to climb into the sky.
Now, he's calling these multiple tornadoes. And note, they are fairly irregularly spaced, I would argue. I don't know what happens between these frames and the next where it appears to immediately disappear.
This particular fireball, a fraction of a second old, has an energy equivalent to 20,000 tons of conventional explosive. Its internal pressure is measured in thousands of pounds per square inch.
Now, just to put thousands of pounds per square inch in context, the latest tests of the Raptor 3 engine used by SpaceX, or to be used by SpaceX, achieve in the chamber, that's not at the nozzle output, a pressure of 5,100 pounds per square inch. And I believe in the early 2000s, Ken Shoulders was saying an exotic vacuum object can produce a pressure equivalent based on the manipulation of matter that it interacts with. Now, I argue that maybe that it can be interacting with that matter in a different way, but let's assume it interacts with it in an ordinary way. He's claiming a pressure of 200,000 pounds per square inch. Okay, so what did they just say here?
Thousands of pounds per square inch.
Thousands of pounds per square inch. So a nuclear blast, thousands of pounds per square inch. A Raptor 3 prototype, 5,100 pounds per square inch in the chamber, not at the nozzle output. And an exotic vacuum object calculated from material damage, and I reserve judgment on whether that's actually based on an impact basis, 200,000 pounds per square inch. So again, he's noting this anti-gravity effect. And this is an airburst, but it's pulled up all of this material in this column.
Pulverizing shockwave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud.
Which seems to follow the rising cloud. The pulverizing, what does it call it? Did it call it the dustifying or the pulverizing?
Pedestal, which rising shock. This pulverizing shock wave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud, developing into the characteristic mushroom shape of a low-altitude burst. Losing brilliance rapidly, the fireball is colored an orange-brown by the release of oxides of nitrogen from the surrounding air. Turbulent and still glowing, it shoots upward with an initial velocity of more than 100 miles.
What does this look like, guys? What does this look like? What does it look like?
Miles per hour. The destruction caused by a relatively low-yield weapon can result in many square miles of ruins and account for thousands of human casualties. But how did it all come about? What caused this destruction? What can we do to increase the destructive effect?
What can we do to increase the destructive effect? Oh, if only we were able to make it worse. Oh, dear. Terrible, 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 terrible. Right, okay. Now we got that out of the way. I would like us to look at explaining Frank Pelevka's wind hex, and these videos from the early 2000s here, and it's on the wind hex blog. Glass bottle going into wind hex. Coming out as 1 micron or so size dust. Fella pillow. Isn't that nice? Practical use of this technology. Why aren't we using more of it? It's been around for nearly a quarter of a century. Right, so we have another video here, which we've seen before. Right, watch what happens to this building here, its roof. If it's going to let me do it. It's dustificating. It's turning to dust. Thankfully, this is not such a powerful tornado. Okay. Right, so we talked about the wind hex, which is a tornado, or turbulence, or whirlwind. It is a Windhexe. I don't know. The Germans are probably going, no, it's not that. Stop saying rubbish accent German words. Okay. So, where is it? Here. Okay, so in O-Day Tornado, our recent presentation here, we showed that the wind hex, it would appear has a beam that comes down, but it has this particular location here in my mind that disrupts matter, and it also has disruption here, and of course you need four for it to connect the disruption beams, otherwise it might start consuming the container. So a minimum of 4 around this, and that is getting the system under control. Okay. So what were these other videos that I'm talking about? Well, I have a clip of that here, and I will show that, and we will look at it in some detail. Okay, so this sequence here is from a video done by Jordan Hall Productions, and I think the particular person taking the video was called Lindsay. And so thank you to them for this. It's being used in the basis of scientific investigation. I've only got a small clip of this, and we'll be talking over it, and I will obviously give credit to the authors and provide links at remoteview.icu with the current blog. Okay, so I'm going to play this through, and then I'm going to ask if there's anything that you guys see. Okay, you're ready. Okay, that's the clip. We're now going to zoom in to a couple of areas in there, and I want to see if people can see what they can see. So we're going to zoom into this area here. He does zoom in himself. Adjust my zoom here. Right. The reason they move the camera out of the way, because they're literally panicking. They are absolutely so frightened as they see these buildings disintegrate. So I'm going to come out here. Okay, let's a couple close-ups here. So we'll take it. The initial building that gets got is this one here. So he zooms into it anyway. So this is from the 26th of April, so I'm very sorry to the people that suffered in this tornado. Now, for the tornado chasers, I don't know whether this is due to YouTube. It probably is. But the artifacts here make it harder to follow as a scientific document, and I would recommend finding a way to upload at a higher resolution somehow, or doing close-ups, and possibly using a camera that, like the new Sony out camera, that does not have rolling shutter. Okay, so they pull away here, and we'll go into the next. In a minute, they go into this one. Okay. Literally, you can see, I'm going to go back. Okay. So it starts to peel off the roof. And already here you can see this building collapsing in. Very, very similar to what you saw in the nuclear blast. But that is a shockwave of air. It's a shockwave of air. Now you can see it peeling back the roof. Maybe this is the insulation in the roof. The whole structure, which one might imagine is a metal roof, but it may not be, of course, but it probably is. It's just being peeled back here. It's totally peeled back. Now they're panicking. So it's understandable when you see this sort of thing. Right. Now, I'm going to look and see what you think you're seeing in a minute. And this whole bit here, which may or may not be a brick wall, it seems to be the end wall that survived the initial lifting off of the roof. It seems to basically go up and across, and as it does, it just bursts into being a load of dust. It's amazing. It's just utterly amazing. In midair, it's kind of like turning to dust. Just like we saw with the other one, but this is more extreme. Now the point is like, is this a wall? Is that the wall? What is it? Is it? I don't know, but it's kind of like totally turning to dust. Is this a load of pieces of, how should we put this, drywall that maybe was on the roof of the barn structure? Because we already know the roof is lifted off. And it's dustifying. You've literally got this thing and it's got trails of dust coming off it. Okay, I'm going to see what you've seen in there. What have you seen in there? You think it's the foundation slab? Maybe. I mean, it looks like it's in sections, a bit like a piece of drywall. So I kind of get the impression that it is drywall panels, you know, bits of cardboard with a skim of plaster on and plaster inside. Because the roof comes off and then it comes off. So the sequence of events is, firstly we lose the roof. Roof comes off, they panic, they go back, so the roof is already in the air. This is the roof, okay? And then there's this stuff that comes up now. So if I go back here, this stuff here, I think, because this is the brick wall, I think at the end, the roof has already gone. The remains of the roof are these fragments up here. And I think this is drywall. That's on the former ceiling of the barn or whatever that structure was, and it's lifting up, and you can see it's in sections here. This looks like the type of sections you get with drywall. Dustifying. Okay. Now. Let me see if we've seen what you think you've seen there. Etheric decompression. That's my view, Phil Dubois. Yes, that's what I think is going on. The gable end, I think, is the brick piece, a black tie. Yes, Elliot, you could suggest that the inside is sucking through. That's a potential thing. It's got a very deep vacuum in there. We know it's a low pressure. But we do know that the wind hex dustifies things extremely quickly. And we do know that the same structure using a Marsa gas on a piece of tungsten dustified tungsten, right? So it's a pretty strong vacuum to suck tungsten atoms away from a piece of tungsten metal. No, it's not. Not that, I don't think. Tungsten's paramagnetic, but when we looked at the tungsten, you could see that there were ball lightning channels. There was also this magnetohydrodynamic vortex structure, and it had torn the matter apart. And in the face filter that I asked one of the world's ball lightning experts, if not the expert, Dr. Georgia Eagley, to put on the end of a vacuum cleaner, we found exactly the same transmuted elements in the mask fibers as we found transmuted on the tungsten rod. So, and because tungsten is a very dense atom, like the lead in Matsumoto's book cover, the lead is spewing out all that carbon. Well, this was synthesizing calcium, it was synthesizing gases, it was synthesizing carbon and much lighter elements and iron, and those take a vastly bigger atomic volume. So as the atoms are changed into other atoms and regain their electrons, they then expand and they literally disintegrate the material. So you get chunks of tungsten attached to all these synthesized elements in the face mask filter. And it's essentially doing exactly the same fractal toroidal magnetohydrodynamic effect. So Joe Vellecci says, I've done hurricane shutters and home wind damage mitigation for the past 20 years too. Oh, I hope you never suffer a big one. Or any of the persons you know, or anyone for that matter. I think we're going to know quite soon, FP Angel, what is causing these effects. We know they occur. I believe it's the magnetohydrodynamic vortex. I believe it's depressurizing the vacuum such that atoms essentially, predominantly electrons, change their behavior. But atoms generally start to fall apart. But the first thing that falls apart is any connection between the atoms of the various types of bonding that electrons can do, all the way down to Casimir and all the way up to covalent and even nuclear. So, Sanabo, but much of that stuff is built with aluminium and are disposable housing and storage systems. Yeah, okay. I'm not saying that, but what we're seeing is, and no one's seen it yet. No one's seen it. So maybe I can give you a clue. And we will go back to our presentation here, which we talked about many moons ago. And this is this water spout with banded inflow off the Florida Keys. And this is 1969, okay? And we've talked about this, the way this inflow here, this dark water, is representing extremely high speed according to their theory of the air movement. But somehow this bit in between isn't high speed. And this area here is not high speed. In fact, you can see the waves in this area are propagating in this direction. And NOAA had put down 2 flares here and here, resulting in the smoke going in these directions. So the wind here is not going in that direction into the vortex. It's going in its own merry direction. It doesn't care. And I argued that there is a inflow of dark matter that's changing the way the electrons behave here. So there is effectively an event horizon where there is zero friction between this fast-moving material here and this other material here. Okay? All right. Let's see if they've got any more comments before I go on. All right. So I'll go back and we'll go back to the video here. And I've got it queued up at the right point here. And this is what I'm referring to. These. These are geese. They're geese. If I can get it in shot again. Look, yeah, let's go back. There are geese. Look, there's two geese here. And they are quite close, it would seem, to the action. And for a small period of time, these geese here struggle to move forward. But they're not moving backwards. They're just stationary in the air. And the geese decide to duck down. So I'm going to go in here. These are our geese. And unfortunately, he's moving the camera around. I guess I could have stabilized it, but I didn't. Let me come to here. Okay, so here's our geese. And we'll go forward. This is real-time playing, 30 frames a second. So what they do is, at this point in the air column, they are only able to match the speed of the air incoming. They're not moving forward or backwards. And then they dive down a bit here. And then they're happily able to fly their own merry way. Completely unencumbered by the so-called 400 kilometer an hour winds that you would expect up to in a F4 tornado. So these geese are what are quite fascinating to me. It's not the only example. I can show you another one from yesterday, and maybe I'll do that, where the bird seems to fly directly behind or through the tornado. But anyway, how fast, and I'm not going to ask a swallow question, how fast does a swallow fly? Let me find out who's going to be the first person. Yeah, how fast does a Canadian geese fly? A Canadian goose. Who can find out the speed of a goose first? Not very fast. 80 kilometers an hour, the speed of a cheetah? Well, maybe. I don't think so. African prime or European? African prime or European? I don't know. Yeah, African or European. What age? I don't know what age they are. The average age, the average speed of a Canadian goose. Can I just say we're 205, so like if you get some other people in here with our peak numbers of viewers have been 247, so how have we got? 33.3 miles per hour. Okay, I'll take that as 46 kilometers per hour. That's about the same as 33.3 miles per hour. So we obviously, Mr. Gate Mode, they can fly slower. Yeah, I've got a figure here of 40 miles per hour. So I think even at the top limit here, so it does say here, and I've looked on ChatGPT here, and it's saying if they have a very fast wind behind them, they can fly in terms of nautical miles or miles on the ground at up to 70 miles an hour. So you weren't far off, but their actual capability to fly in still air is around about 40 miles per hour maximum. That means that the air coming towards them was at that point around about 40 miles per hour, which does not even get to be any type of tornado speed. It doesn't even classify. It's basically a gust, right? So that is not something that they are having to contend with. They're not contending with 300-mile-an-hour winds at this point. They are contending with, at this point, around about 40 miles an hour, and they duck down and lower down. They're able to proceed on their merry way. So we know that pretty darn close to this tornado, just like we saw in this image here, in this NOAA image, the wind is basically not even there. And that bodes very well for the wind hex. There is a focused beam. Now, in the wind hex, we know that moisture and air, obviously, is coming out of the top in this central column. And we have actually, Tony Aboni has observed a caduceus coming up the middle here. Caduceus coming up the middle here. So we're going to look at a couple of other tornadoes from recent days. I have a couple of clips. Okay, so here's another tornado here. Now there is a bird here. That is a bird. It's ridiculous. It's flying, it would appear, through the tornado. Okay, so here we have another example, a couple of days later, where the bird is flying through, or very, very close to the tornado. Now, in this video, it shows something remarkable at the end here. They're going around looking at some of the storm damage, if I can find it here, and you see this. This is a heavy lump of iron. Do we really think that sucked it out? Do we really think that sucked it out? Did that get sucked out from there, or did it pop out? And if it popped out, why would it being popped out? Can anyone guess why I think that that would pop out? Anyone think why this would pop out? Pressure. Why? Yes, anti-gravity. Yes, why? There's one more. Can you get it? Can you get it? Magnetism. Excellent with William Schwandt. So we have three possible reasons here. One, anti-gravity. Okay, so the ground obviously is stuck to the ground. It's not going to come up, right? The ground's not going to come up. But we know this is mild steel. It's basically iron, carbon steel. And so this will be ferromagnetic. And so it's not a surprise if that would rise up, okay, if there was a magnetic thing there. And we do know this has a magnetic beam. And the second thing is, one would imagine down in this manhole cover over here that it was covering, the actual manhole, it's a sewer cover. And what would you have in the sewer? Especially in heavy rains. What would you have in a sewer in heavy rains? Gas. What kind of gas, Starfish Troopers? Very good, TP Sven. Water, moisture. Excellent. So, what do we know that the Wintex is extremely good at. Extremely good at. We know that the Wintex is extremely good at extracting water and throwing it up out here because it desiccates vegetables instantly, practically. We also know that this water spout is literally pulling water, possibly in a vapor state, up here. Yeah? So, I believe that in this zone here, it is converting this water to water gas. It's doing the same in the vegetables that it desiccates in here. It's converting it to water gas. Right? Why? And I've said this many moons ago. It's because water is actually a liquid because of ionic bonds. Right? These are really quite weak. So the first thing that would essentially be broken in the water is the ionic bonds. And this is exactly my argument for how the Great Pyramid of Giza works. The water down in that subterranean layer will be first split apart in terms of the ionic molecules become water gas, but they are not boiling. All it's doing is it's becoming water gas. This is the argument I said many moons ago for this 1920s book that said, and they calculated the amount of energy that must be in ball lightning because when it went into a barrel of water, it boiled off all the barrel of water. I don't think it boiled off the barrel of water. What it did is it turned it into water gas and it looked like it was boiling, but it wasn't hot. It was because we know water can be transported, according to another anecdote, by a ball lightning. And when the ball lightning fails, the water comes out. So inside it's not hot, right? But on the outside, this is a cold nuclear process. It's literally cold fusion in that kind of way, right? Okay. So when the thing is spun up, it'll first, in my view, take the water to being water gas. Then it's basically a gas in the environment. And I believe when it spins up a little bit more, because the water molecule is polar, it therefore can, in a spin situation, kind of enhance the process. When it gets up to the next level, I believe it will actually separate the water molecule. It'll separate it into hydrogen and oxygens. And as I argued, the oxygen goes into the Queen's chamber, the hydrogen comes up, and then you have the granite, which has the high energy alpha, beta, and gamma rays from that thorium and uranium gamma from the Aswan quarry, and that will split it into proper charge separation. The etheric matter clusters, the protons, and the electrons. And that will then kick it into full gear, and you'll get that spherical thing inside a triangle like you see on the Masonic temples. Okay. All right. So here we can see it's water. We know this desiccates, and here we have a manhole cover comes off, and it probably was fairly tightly fitting in there. In fact, it almost looks like the tarmac was laid over the top of it. And if you go back to the actual thing, it looks like it's got tarmac on top. So maybe it wasn't even able to be seen easily, but whatever. This has popped itself out of there. And I think it just went and came up. You can see the prevailing tornado direction here because of this falling over, maybe. But there we go. So I think conclusively, in my view, we can say that the fractal toroidal moment is able to loft things. And part of that lofting process is because it is separating the material into extremely small particles. And those particles are in this overall kind of motion into the structure. Okay. Depressurizing the vacuum. Okay. All right. So the other thing that I want to look at in that video before I go in back to the nuclear blast videos is what I think has happened to the... and we'll come on to see that in a minute, but give me a sec. I don't want that anymore. Okay, so here. what we have seen is our roof here has been peeled off. Now, what do people think this roof is made of? What do we think it's made of? It looks like the first roof that comes off here is corrugated iron. You can almost see the corrugated iron. What do people typically build the roof of? I can actually kind of see the corrugation here. Here, okay? This corrugation here. And basically, it looks like it's turned into a piece of fabric, like the kind of things that we saw from the Czech tornado, okay? The metal starts to become a piece of fabric. Now, it kind of loses its normal metallic bonds. And what do I mean by that? Well, we'll go and have a look at another one of our experiments to ring this home. This was in the presentation Practical Applications of the Fractal Toroidal Moment. And it is slide 36 here. You can download this. And if you recall, this is a piece of 75 micron thin indium, which ordinarily melts at 156.6 degrees centigrade. This test was conducted shortly after the test that vaporized in or sublimed, according to Dr. Roshan Amaza, tungsten to a white fume, but that we actually established was well below even its melting point. And in fact, it wasn't all tungsten oxide, as some people speculate. It was basically a whole bunch of transmuted elements with lumps of tungsten that were smashed off as this occurred. So immediately we go and test with a piece of indium that's the thickness of a human hair and melts at 156.6 degrees C. And what does it do? It turns to a rubbery sheet. It's not falling under gravity, and it doesn't actually melt until it transmutes. It then transmutes, and those things then thermally heat up. It transmutes largely to carbon, and then it heats up, and then it melts it, and then it drops. Okay, this is the aluminium of John Hutchison, which Alec Pizzero came in after it was glowing yellow-orange, and he went to touch it. It wasn't glowing yellow-orange anymore shortly after he turned off the electromagnetic waves, and he went to pick it up, and his fingerprint went into it a certain distance in. And here we have what heat does to a metal. This is what an intense amount of pressure does to metal, and this is bending. And I think because the electrons in a metal bond are delocalized, they allow slipping or jellification like this without heat. It's a cold process. It's cold metal forming. And if you want to see about cold metal forming, I would go and look at the several references in Tom Bearden's, the sadly departed Tom Bearden's Fer de Lance, which he first reported on his experience of cold metal forming in 1992. And this book was, I think this is the September the 15th, 1998 edition, although I think this is actually the print from 2002. Okay? So I think it's turning the material to jelly. And we see it here. So I'm thinking this probably here is insulation between the metal, the wood frame, and the plasterboard. So that's the plasterboard here, the metal on top, the insulation in between, maybe a metal frame. They come back here, and this is lofted in the air. Now, as this goes around, the interesting thing is here, if this is an F4, you're talking about 400 kilometers an hour wind, let's say up to 300 miles or whatever it is, 250 miles an hour wind. This doesn't look like that. And in fact, it's going at least as much up as it is going sideways. It's going at least as much up as it's going sideways. And, you know, if this is plasterboard or this is not metal, then it's not gravity necessarily in this case. It is, as is being claimed in reference to the nuclear blast, a type of anti-gravity. But what I would suggest is the normal vector of the thing that causes gravity is coming into the Earth down here, and this thing is actually sucking it up. So there's no pressure down at all. In fact, there's negative pressure. It's literally sucking it out of the Earth. It's sucking it out of the Earth, and rather than pushing down on the Earth, it's then pulling this material up. That is the anti-gravity, right? It's pulling it out of the matter of the Earth, okay? And so it's lifting up. So literally in the same number of frames it goes sideways, it almost goes up more. And that includes tearing it off the top of the building, okay? And then we go on a little bit and he comes back. If I zoom out. No, I don't fit. Then we have our building coming apart. Now here you can see in midair, here in midair, it's still disintegrating, still falling apart. It's still falling apart. And in fact, what happens is it's there. If we follow it through, it's going there. It's now at the head of the column of the tornado, and it starts to come around the back side. And as it goes around the back side, it actually lifts up. It lifts up. It's lifting up there and it's disintegrating still. This is the roof, which we presume is metal. Now, at this point, we can imagine it's basically somewhere there. And there are Canada geese are in here. There's our Canada geese, comfortably matching the speed of the air column there. And what happens here is the Canada geese are here. And the backside of the tornado is coming over here. And it looks like this is the remains of the roof. I'm not certain, but it looks like it's the remains of the roof. Okay, over here. And basically, it looks like a bunch of wet noodles. It's moving around like a bunch of wet noodles. It's literally like a bunch of wet noodles. Okay? Now we know, I've just shown you, that in the Hutchison effect, aluminium can be turned to something akin to a soft putty. Ball lightning has known to do that because that occurred in a train in Hungary. I think it was in Hungary, with one of the anecdotes recorded by Dr. George Eagley, where ball lightning came alongside a train and it touched the aluminium window frame, and for about 20 minutes the passenger was able to manipulate the aluminium with his fingers. And in Tom Bearden's book, when you do the cold metal forming process and you impregnate the metal with something, or you excite the metal in some way, you were able to press it into a mold until you then drained off whatever it was you'd put in there, and the metal then wasn't plastic. So here you have these noodle-like beams. Okay, so it doesn't really matter whether they're aluminium. I don't think they're wood. I don't think wood becomes noodle-like. And in fact, I think what we're seeing here is a lump of wood, and this might be a lump of wood. Okay, so the lump of wood is moving around like a lump of wood, and the metal is moving around like noodles. And it's not bashing into anything that you might say is bending it. It's not bashing into anything that you might say is bending it. It's just moving around in the breeze like a noodle. Like you've got a big fan and you've thrown a few wet noodles into the air. The wood is flapping about, right? But the metal is like a noodle. Okay? All right. So I think that probably does it. I think essentially it is an anti-gravity effect, but this is the same effect that we'd use for propulsion. This is what's going on in the Frank Polivka's wind hex. Partly the process can be accentuated by particular materials that don't have a strong bond. So I don't think the bond in gypsum with which dry board is largely constructed is very strong. So it just turns to powder very, very quickly. Yeah? Just turns to powder. That's what you're seeing here. Okay? Probably the cement between the bricks turns to powder very, very quickly, because probably the water is ripped right out of it. You can imagine that the cement on the wall here you know, the mortar might be moist, and if the mortar's moist, then the water's going to turn to water gas, it's going to expand, and it's going to start to disintegrate that. But then glass is effectively a liquid. It's not a crystal lattice, it's an amorphous substance, so glass could probably do the same thing. So you imagine that something that's made of concrete or plaster or glass would disintegrate and become dust. Okay? Disintegrate and become dust. Okay? All right, so let's go and have a look at our where should we go? We are going to look at our what I'm calling Boom 2. So, for the sake of argument, right. Here is our video, and what I've got here, we'll play it through again and remind ourselves of what was thought to be important by Stoyan Sarg as an expert in atmospherics and
burst of a typical
that's really unpleasantly loud.
nuclear weapon exploded at a height of about 2,000 feet. The first observed effect is a brilliant flash of bluish-white light that overwhelms the vision of even distant observers. The ball of fire, an incandescent sphere of glowing gases,
the plume that's coming up from
whose internal temperature is measured in thousands of degrees, starts to climb into the sky. This particular fireball, a fraction of a second old, has an energy...
What would cause these? If these are, as he suspects, tornadoes, then you effectively have, in my view, standing waves. Okay?
Second old has an energy equivalent to 20,000 tons of conventional explosive. It's
Right, ready for it? I'm going to turn on the new layer here, and you're going to see something rather lovely. Rather lovely. Are you ready for it? This is Boom 2 video.
Internal pressure is measured in thousands of pounds per square inch. This pulverizing shock wave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud, developing into the characteristic mushroom shape of a low-altitude burst. Losing brilliance rapidly, the fireball is colored an orange-brown by the release of oxides of nitrogen from the surrounding air. Turbulent and still glowing, it shoots upward with an initial velocity of more than 100 miles per hour.
You ready? You ready? Here comes the apple again.
The destruction caused by a relatively low-yield weapon can result in many square miles of ruins and account for thousands of human casualties. But how did it all come about?
Let's see that again.
This pulverizing shock wave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud.
Seems to. The dust pedestals, it basically doesn't, the ground is pulverized. It's pulverized by the shock wave coming out from the blast, but as soon as the apple is formed and the charged particles start going around in a magnetohydrodynamic fashion, and because it is a full torus effectively, it will produce a toroidal moment. It'll then be sucking in all the available, in my view, relic neutrinos that would otherwise cause a gravity effect, and this is the azimuth through which they are minimally able to pass, and therefore anything down here can only really go up, because it's still pulling the material, like this is like a monopole. Everything's going into this point here, okay?
Developing into the characteristic mushroom shape of a low altitude.
Of course, this is more like a column than a spread out thing, although you can see a little bit here. It's a column because this is a full tor, you know, with many subtors in there, making the current structures.
This pulverizing shock wave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud.
You see how it works within here and so forth?
Developing into the characteristic mushroom shape of a low-altitude burst.
Okay, we have another one over here.
The destruction caused by a relatively low-yield weapon can result in many square miles of ruins and account for thousands of human casualties.
Now, I want to dial that back to here, right there, and I'm going to bring on our monopole, which is a tour of a subtour of a subtour, I think of a subtour, on the Amazagas treated 10 yen coin. Okay? All right? And if you look, it has this spread out here, it has the beam down, and it also has this part off to one side. Not on this side is different, right? So this is the side that it's coming from and going to, okay? So it's coming out of here and round and into here, out of here and round and into here, okay? And on the side it's going into, it has this tongue coming out. This has this tongue coming out, okay? Absolutely exactly the same, right? I will overlay on this one here the sacred geometry, okay? So this side here is where you get this extra business over here. This side, we have these lines. Now, what do you think these lines are? And I would actually like to know what orientation this is in. I would like to know what orientation this is. What do you think these lines are? He's calling it multiple tornadoes. Okay? Yeah, there's a real attachment here. You're right. Particularly on the previous one over here.
This pulverizing shock wave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud, developing into the characteristic mushroom shape of a low-altitude burst. The destruction caused by a relatively low-yield weapon can result in many square miles of ruins and account for...
So, what do you think these are here? I mean, he's saying they're multiple tornadoes. That's what they do when they hit the ground here. But what are they? You wanted the Tesla Tower, did you? You mean this Tesla Tower? Here. That Tesla Tower. The two Ds are exactly marked on the intersection of the golden ratio line and the center line through the three things that create a ball lightning. Okay? Here is our structure. Here is it in water. And this is, I've always said that this is depressurization. It has to be depressurization here for these bubbles to form and then reflect the light from the torch that I'm shining on them. So there is a beam that comes down here and it interacts with here, and this bubble thing gets sucked into here if you go and look at the actual video. Exactly the same thing in hydrodynamics. And by the way, these dust particles are going around in their own merry direction, completely separately from the direction that this is traveling in. Okay? That's the caduceus that comes down from the structure. That is the caduceus, right? You can see that on the caduceus of the mushroom cloud, it's even going around same way we've got it going on this one. Okay? This is the tungsten I was talking about that transmuted and came into the filter with George Eagley, and this is the point where it's disintegrated. This is depressurization. I've literally always said that this is etheric depressurization. Okay, and the matter just falls apart. This is just a standard smoke ring. Now the smoke ring here, although it forms the same structure, it isn't really so much charged particles. Yes, particles of smoke can gain charge, okay? But it's not the same level of destructive capability as something like this on the HHO, the charge separated water in a vortex burning on this 10 yen coin, and not the same as the HHO in this case on the tungsten, smashing apart this tungsten. And if I can show you, that's what it looks like. Okay. And I'll turn it off. Okay, turn it back on. So this is our monopole-like structure, and my main point here is that this over here, with this bit and this all sort of glowy area over here, is marked in this exact structure over here. We have this lip, this kind of bit that sticks down here, and this affected area, and this is not really affected. This bit sticks down here. Now, I don't know whether this is maybe facing north, and maybe someone can look at the test range and establish whether these mountains would imply that this is facing north or south. But did anyone, if you have said it already before, what do you think these lines are? And note that the lines kind of bend round here, and in this case, they come back in. This goes down here, and it comes in here. Comes down here and comes in here. What do we think these lines are? Are they releasing magnetism? I think it's related to that. Why does the sacred geometry look exactly like an owl? The owl is the symbol of Delphi. Delphi is where the oracle of Delphi was. Gravity lines, well, you could argue that it is. Magnetic reversal, possibly. Magnetic waves, possibly. Water vapor, good, Phil Dubois. It's water vapor. Why? Think about gravity. Think about etheric matter. What's going on? I think these are condensation lines. And they're condensation lines because these are cold lines. Why? Because these are the standing wave nodes that come out of, or it's an effect of, the magnetotoroelectrical structure that is in here. And I think these are exactly and precisely equivalent to what we showed in a separate presentation very recently in the tornado presentation on the next slide from this one, in the pseudo Searle-Frett generator. Okay? Where you have crossing points of 180 degrees out of phase electromagnetic waves. This is exactly what you need to create a phase conjugation point, okay? And the scalar wave is going out here, but they are fixed because of the way this emits it. And what did he say? Sergei Godin said that this was a cold zone. This was a cold zone. This was a cold zone. And he assumes that it bends round, but as high as they could go up into the building, it was just a column of cold in a column of cold. Right. So we know that the Searle-like effect generator was able to produce an anti-gravity effect. Moreover, if you turned this device upside down, it produces a positive gravity effect. It pushes down into the ground. So you could imagine that if you made a purely electromagnetic structure like this, and you reversed the way it works, it would push down into the ground and it would chew up things that it was interacting with. And, it would basically, because it's working with gravity, and it would spit it out of its bum. It would be the reverse. Rather than pulling it into its bum, it would be pushing it out. Yeah? It would consume the matter. Now, what did Tom Bearden also talk about? Well, he talked about Tesla's various equipments that were offered prior to the Second World War to end all wars. Technology that would create an invisible Chinese wall. An invisible Chinese wall. And what was that? Well, according to Tom Bearden, this was one of the tests of the Soviet energetics, I think Duga arrays, their scalar interferometry weapons, on the 9th of April, 1984. 9th of April, 1984. Now, in figure 36, which is on page 452 of said volume Fer de Lance, this is the 2002 print, it says exothermic, but it is not exothermic, it's endothermic, because over here he says an exothermic mode, right? And he calls it cold explosion. So this is just a mistype in his original slide. So, endothermic cold explosion. This is exactly what we have seen in the very first video I shared on the blog of remoteview.icu. In fact, I'm gonna pull that up. It's a cold Coulombic explosion. The very first video I shared on remoteview.icu. Cold Coulombic explosion. And this is where you condense the matter into a spot using the phase conjugation and the scalar interferometry, and it sheds all its heat and the matter gets collapsed and collapsed and collapsed and collapsed. And then you release this confining field, and all of the coherent matter that's lost all this thermal energy, right, in the process of cohering, then detonates and comes out, because the electrons that are in a coherent state and can therefore occupy the same space-time are then converted into normal electrons that have the Pauli exclusion principle, and they fly away from each other in a Coulombic explosion, but they fly away from each other with velocity, but they have no thermal energy themselves. So it blows out, but it's also cold. And we demonstrated that in a Vega experiment several years ago, Henk-Uren, and this for me was a seminal moment in the journey of the MFMP. Totally seminal moment. So let me just pick that up. So for those that haven't seen it or are new to this, it's a real clincher. So this was shared on December the 10th, 2020. And we will go to YouTube to watch this. And I will kill the advert here before we go over. Right. And then we will show you. Right. So in the blog, I said, what is Vega? What is it showing us? And what can we learn from it? Well, here, my friends, we are learning still. Thank you to Henk. So what we have is the entire base of this chamber is a cathode. It's biased at a couple of 100 volts, and then it has a Cockcroft-Walton double-sided generator that produces pulses of around 5 to 750 volts, and you see what it does here. Right. They are cold explosions. They are Coulombic explosions from coherent electrons. Here is where an explosion just went off, and the image picked up by the photosensor in the camera has gone from this bright color, because it's hotter, to this dark color because it's colder. And you can see that over a period of time, it then warms up with energy coming in from the outside. And this is consistent with all of the explosions. And another one just happened there. And over a period of time, it warms up to the base temperature of the environment. Okay? So these are cold Coulombic explosions. Cold Coulombic explosions. Okay. So let's go back to our work of the Soviets during the energetic period. Okay, so they say here, the sequence of events. A geyser of water rose rapidly from the surface and mushroomed out. So this is the geyser of the water, okay? And this is from a cold explosion. So under the water, they will be creating coherent matter waves. Coherent matter under the water. And the condensation of that matter will release vast amounts of thermal heat, and you can build that up and build that up, and then you trigger it by releasing the confining scalar interferometry, and it then detonates in a cold explosion, producing this. Okay? And given that this is 200 miles from sea level, you can imagine that the height of this is rising to, at this point, to, let's say, I don't know, 90 miles high. So this geyser of water, it actually says here, reached 60,000 feet altitude in about 2 minutes. In about 2 minutes. Yes, it is Bose-Einstein condensate related. You make a Bose-Einstein condensate in this small location, but it's vast amounts of matter that has completely lost all thermal energy. And the electrons in there and the protons, they're occupying the same space-time. And then what happens, you remove that confining field and it basically falls apart. Because everything becomes normal protons, normal electrons, and they don't want to be anywhere near each other, and they fly apart and they suck energy out in the environment. That is why it's a cold explosion. Brilliantly glowing small globe then appeared in top of cloud. Here, this here is a glowing sphere. A glowing sphere, like the mother of all ball lightnings, because if this is 200 miles from here to here, this has got to be many miles across, right? The globe increased greatly in size and altitude. So this globe then was expanded. It reached a diameter of 380 miles, and the center reached an altitude of 200 miles above sea level. And what it says here, now read this word specifically. Superpotential interferometry using longitudinal electromagnetic waves. Superpotential interferometry. Right. Cold explosion just above the surface as anti-ship and anti-fleet. So the cold explosion they create is designed to destroy a fleet of ships or to be an anti-ship weapon. Smaller, higher density spherical shell, the Tesla globe, for 1-on-1 shooting. So they're saying that this Tesla globe, you should be able to shoot this to destroy something. And in that case, this structure here is directable. This spherical structure here could be directable. This one here, like if I go quick and get that's what I'm pointing to. That sphere there, right? That can be directed and shot at something. Larger Tesla globe for large area targets such as ICBMs coming in from mid-course. Use in and out of atmosphere. These large spheres, because of what they are, when a nuclear weapon will come into them, it will disrupt their electronics and effectively deactivate them. Okay? So, he's saying down here, endothermic cold explosion, 9th of April 1984, 94, 2004, 2014. Yes, my friends, they've had a means to destroy anything they wish on planet Earth very, very easily, including making nuclear weapons completely ineffectual, knocking anything out of the sky and knocking anything out of the sea for 40 years. Why do we believe the nonsense that they feed us about what we should be fearing about? If they wanted to do this kind of stuff, they could just do it, right? Why should we fear? Stop the fearing. Don't buy into the fearing, okay? And I ask, stop the killing. And can we use this technology for the benefit of humanity, okay? We know we can process food with it. It does that. We know we can recycle materials that are much harder to recycle and more energetically demanding in other ways. Let's do that. Why don't we remediate nuclear waste? Yeah, let's do that. Let's stop having this boondoggle for millions and billions for numbers of centuries. No, let's just deal with it, okay? Let's deal with pollution of other forms and let's produce energy. And why not have propulsion as well? Okay, there might be some issues with the kind of interacting with things because of you're removing neutrino or relic neutrinos or whatever, but it's unlimited energy if you're just lifting a load of water up to the top of the hill and letting it go through the existing hydroelectric dams. There's literally no excuse except that it's deliberate. Deliberate. Or we're just run by stupid people. Really stupid and ignorant people. That's it. That's all I can conclude. Okay. So basically you have a set of tools in this one image, and he goes on and on and on about it in this book. So he says that this was a Khrushchev's second demonstration. It was deep underwater on the 11th of April, 1963. So sorry, this was 1963, by the way. And so he did a scalar interferometry weapons test, and he says it looks a bit like this test, which was conducted by the USS Thresher. No, sorry, it wasn't. This test was deep underwater nuclear burst. So this was a US test 100 miles north of Puerto Rico over the Puerto Rican Trench. And it shows this explosion of water column coming up. It's an underwater nuclear test. And it says that this is equivalent to the test that was conducted purely electromagnetically on the 11th of April, 1963. 1963. When I say this technology has been around since the 1950s, it's been around since the 1950s. Okay? But what we are showing you with Bin Jrin Huang's cavitator is exactly the same forces are produced by cavitation. Exactly the same. And they are doing gentle nuclear transmutation, leading to synthesis of potentially elements you might want without chopping down a mountainside, right? Or potentially energy that you might want, or potentially decontamination that you might want to do with Roy Ishinomasu's vibrator plates. Put them in those tanks in Fukushima and stop dumping it into the sea, thank you very much. Of course, the sea has got cavitation, blah, 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 but this is a way to just make sure it's not going into the food chain, right? It's real. We have 100% categorical proof that the same thing that occurs in those nuclear bombs, but in a completely uncontrolled way, is being achieved in a controlled way because we understand and can work with whirlwinds. We understand and can work with whirlwinds, but not to kill people, to do work to benefit humanity and the biosphere. Okay, so I can just go through citation after citation from his book here, where he's talking about this. I encourage you to get it and look at it for yourself. He's got another drawing here of this. This is the same 5:14 a.m. 1984. That's it. So the actual plume there was 150 miles in diameter. 150 miles in diameter. No nuclear weapon here. No radiation. Okay? No nuclear weapon. Probably what you would get out of this is a lot of iron-rich crenellated microspheres and a lot of carbon and a lot of oxygen, probably a lot more oxygen, but you're starting with oxygen in the water and hydrogen, so you might get carbon actually, okay? It's weird like that. There's actually a benefit exchange reaction because you've got hydrogen and oxygen, okay? Thank you very much, Black Tie. That's really generous. Really appreciate that. We literally have the God's little g toolbox in our grasp. We literally have it. Here, another image. This is a shield, and it says Tesla shield. Tesla shield, right? And it's got images of things hitting the shield and disintegrating. And what did Tesla say in his... here we go. Let's find it here. This is... Have I got it here? Maybe I haven't got it here. Oh, I don't know whether I've got it here. Oh, yes, I have. Which I talked about in O Day Noon. Tesla here, showing in this image here 100% certainly that he knew that this structure is what did it, right? Knowing that the Vesica Pisces and this central line, 100%, having four support frames on this, exactly showing that he knew that the Maltese cross was the way that you did this. And he says here, war clouds were again darkening in Europe on 11th of July 1934. The headline on the front page of the New York Times read, Tesla at 78 bears new death beam. The article reported that the new invention will send concentrated beams of particles through the free air of such a tremendous energy that they will bring down a fleet of 10,000 enemy planes at a distance of 250 miles. What is that again? What did they say? Well, that's 150 miles diameter just for a test in 1984. Tesla stated that the death beam would make war impossible by offering every country an invisible Chinese wall. Thank you very much, Craig. That's, again, very generous of you. It really helps. Okay, so we have shown in our experimentations, thank you to Henk Urian, that Coulombic explosions are real and they are cold explosions. Okay? This is a coherent matter becoming incoherent. That was shared on December the 10th, 2020. Okay? We have shown that this exact sacred geometry structure, when you have four structures around it, is brought under control, and you can process foods and you can process other materials. Thank you, really good, Dak. That's really, wow, guys, you're going to make me cry. But I just want the death and mayhem to end. You know, I made a decision in 2017 when I realized what this technology could do, that and that it had already been weaponized, that I had one choice, and that was to move ahead with trying to make it very, very clear for people to understand that this is a real thing. It isn't just some flights of fantasy by a former colonel of the US Army. This is a real thing, and we've shown the thing at work. And I think I have to thank Binzhen Huang for working with me, because that data that emerged out of his reactor that produced excess heat is just totally and utterly conclusive that the same thing that produces that Tesla knew about. There's no way he did not know that. There's literally no way. This photo, just zero. Phi on his tie, the life part of the circle of life, exactly as is represented on those scientific documents from the early Coptic Christian artwork stele. This with the four things around it, even around the base with the quad scallion, you might call it, that they have around the base here. Just everything about this photo, his pose, the gauntness of his face, everything is so wonderfly deliberate in my view. Okay, so I'll go back to here, and we'll do Photoshop here. No shadow of a doubt. This likely was pulling etheric matter out of the center, out of the earth, and that would provide energy. It's not just a transmission device, in my view. And unless it was just forming a circuit loop, and then that you would have nodes like you have nodes here. Okay, but whatever. This is certainly, in my view, the same thing, and this is it actually at work, right? So you put those things together, and you kind of basically explained why they do the burst at a certain height above the ground. I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, I don't know how they've kept this secret for so long. It beggars all belief. But this has been a huge community effort, and you can see from here that the Caduceus will knife into the ground, and we see this on that war between Thoth and Seth in that ancient Egyptian tug of war that they had between the yang and the yin, those two forces that are present in the universe. But here, yes, as you can see, the Caduceus goes around this way. The Caduceus is going around this way. You can see it on the tornado videos here. If I can pull that up, you can come back here. You can see the vorticity here somewhere, wherever it is. Okay, so it's going around in that same direction. It depends which side it is, but anyway, when you look at it from the ground perspective. But this is my pleasure and honor to share this with you. It's been a deep burden these years, but it has to be said. It has to be said. Okay, I'm going to look at your questions in a minute. I'm just going to put this on play.
This pulverizing shock wave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud, developing into the characteristic mushroom shape of a low-altitude burst. The destruction caused by a relatively low-yield weapon can result in many square...
So I think that these are gravity waves, and they're standing waves in gravity, and this is what is said by Tom Bearden when you have these phase conjugated electromagnetic waves, and we know that the fractal toroidal moment produces phase conjugation in its emitted waves because they cancel at a distance to produce a non-radiating boundary. So there's no electromagnetic waves outside of a particular boundary. There is an electromagnetic wave here when a nuclear weapon goes off, because it is not under control. Okay, so you get an electromagnetic pulse, and we also replicated that in the work of Henk Urian, and that was the second video that I shared on the remoteview.icu blog with respect to the Vega reactors. So let me bring that up. And here it is. And in this video, I asked Henk to get an AM radio between stations, just as John Hutchison did, and to see, because he's got an iron chamber. The first thing I asked him to do is just get an iron chamber, remove a stainless steel chamber. So we changed it for an iron chamber. So we have effectively a Faraday cage around this thing, and he ran the test with an AM radio between stations. And when you see the flash inside the chamber, thank you very much, Laura. Thank you and thank you, Daz Pizzazz. That's really kind of you, guys. This is really generous. What you're hearing here, if you can hear it, I don't know whether you can hear it. Okay, you can't hear it. Okay, let me see. That's probably good because of that. I need to add in whatever this is in. What is this in? Yikes, that's painful for me. So I need to come out of that. Let me just fix that for you. I need to add that into the audio feed. So what is that? That is in Safari? It's in Safari. Give me a second and you'll hear the pops. Wow, thank you, Earthworm Jim. That's so generous. My God, guys, knocking it out of the park today. Wow. I might even be able to afford an assistant to join me at the conference. Good, thank you. So I'm going to add Safari in, so that should now work. So let me see if that's going to work. Kill the audio there. Give me a second. We're nearly there. We're nearly there. Okay. All right. Here. Okay. So let's hope this works. Yeah, so it's tuned between stations, and when you get the explosions, you have this EMP that produces a broad spectrum of radio waves that is observed and heard and caught on the video camera, but it's captured outside this Faraday cage. Sounds like a loose bolt, yeah. Okay, all right, so that's that. So that was the second video that was shared, and it was even shared on the same day, December the 10th, 2020. Okay, electromagnetic pulse generator, EMP generator. So in the case of a nuclear weapon, because it's not under control, it will create EMPs. But I think, for instance, we know in the Binger and Huang cavitation system that it is producing these things, and they are breaking up. So when they break up, you can imagine there might be some EMP from that. But because it's in a copper pipe and the copper pipe's grounded, then you might not hear it. But maybe if you were in something else, you would be able to pick up these electromagnetic pulses. So there we go. So I think that's kind of what I wanted to say tonight. And really thank you for everyone that joined. I will include other videos and all the original references that I gave here today. I don't think there's anything else I really wanted to say. But essentially, Tesla knew that 4 was the way to get this under control for structures. He knew that it was this geometry. He knew, just as his weapons were effectively developed, that it would produce controllable ball lightning that could be moved around with the same electromagnetic waves, that they do produce gravity waves. And like I'm saying, that just like I showed on this device, where if I can find it again, on this one here, this was suggested by Sergei Godin, that the brilliant minds, the best minds in Russia, suggest that this is, like Bitchkov said, that this is a superfluid etheric substance, and that is being fed around in loops, but they have no idea how high this goes up. And I think it's going all the way up. And in fact, if you actually go into Stoyan Sarg's basic structures of matter, and as a gravity researcher, you would expect him to think about these subjects. in the back of the book, he actually shows some observations of gravity waves that were detected using equipment. Let me see if I can find it, which page it's on. And this isn't using the laser interferometry method. I'm not sure what method was used, but you can literally see the banding on the images. I can't find it right now. Can I find it? I'll try and find it. Find it? No, can't find it. Which page it's on? Oh, I think it's near the back. Come on. Anyway, I think they're gravity waves. I think the gravity waves are relic neutrinos or whatever the ether is made of. And because it is doing extraction of energy at these points as observed by Sergei Godin in a thing that, in my view, is replicating a fractal toroidal structure. And as we said in other videos, my ICCF 25 presentation, Practical Applications of the Fractal Toroidal Moment, it is what allows for cold electricity here. It is that, and it is this 1979 field resonance propulsion concept here. This is producing a toroidal moment. It is a propulsion device. This is a propulsion device, and this basically is a model of a nuclear blast which is not under control, and it is the model of the structures that are moving around in the thunderstorm generator of Malcolm Bendel, and in similar systems, and also in the Vega experiments, and in the Ultra experiments, and in the Nova experiments, and all these experiments we've been doing these years. These are the things that are flying around in there, and it is also in the reactor of Binzhuan Huang. It's exactly the same thing. It's not slightly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing, except when you have got these resonance systems, you kind of have it under control. And that's where I like the Polivka's system, because it's kind of like a beautiful level of control in there, and it has a direct and useful purpose. Okay, so I'm going to look at any questions you might have, and then I'm going to call it a night. So, Lithnik asks a question. In the explosion, when we start to see the anti-gravity effect start pulling the dust up, is there a bright spot in the disruption zone? Let's have a look. So let's pull up our disruption zone here. That's our disruption zone, and let's wind this one back to... well, it starts a bit late in this case. Let me move that down and get it to the same scale, roughly. Okay, so that is the disruption point is there. I think they chose the height of these nuclear weapons to maximize the amount of disruption that they would do underneath the target spot. So yes, you get a blast zone around here, but what I think they would have wanted to do is to maximize the destruction here. I think when nuclear weapons were made, they knew precisely what they were doing, and they knew what the magnetohydrodynamic effect would do, and they knew that it would pull stuff up. I don't think that this is a revelation here to people that have got the right clearances.
This pulverizing shock wave forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud, developing into the...
Okay, let's have a look on this one. So we're like more like a bit smaller on this one, aren't we? Okay. Again, it's the right height above the ground. This cannot be coincidence. It just cannot be coincidence that they chose this height above the ground. I think it's for maximum destruction at the target below the center of the detonation.
The destruction caused by a relatively
well, this kind of looks a bit like
low-yield weapon can result in
really
many
are seeing
square...
faces in clouds. What is interesting to me here is that if we conclude that these are gravity waves, as would be suggested by phase conjugated electromagnetic waves that we know come out of a fractal toroidal system at distances and cause the cold parallel bars, as was observed in the John Searle type replication by Sergei Godin. That firstly, they bend around this structure. We don't know what it's doing here, but maybe it's bending around this part. I imagine that these ones are bending around here. These ones are bending around here. There's none over here. There's only one that comes towards the center of this structure here. Okay? All right? So these are effectively, maybe they're coming to here and they just bend around here. But the interesting thing is you can see that maybe this one comes down here and it just stops dead. And this one comes down here and it pulls in. It pulls in. So if the gravity flux is coming down here and it's being caught in standing waves this way, the gravity flux is being pulled down here and it's being pulled in here, then this is literally anti-gravity. This is literally anti-gravity. It's literally there. That is what you need to know here. And the main beam of anti-gravity here, this is what, if you had a UFO, you know, a spacecraft that was built on this technology, this would be the tractor beam. This would be the tractor beam that would pull your things into your spacecraft. Okay? These ones are largely parallel down here. Okay? All right? Nature is our teacher, YPi, yes. Elusive 328, beam me up. Yeah. I'm not sure I'd want to be in here, but I think you could be lofted up in here. I think what might happen is if you wanted to destroy something, let's say a big metal thing that might be like quite tall, and you did the reverse thing here, as Sergei Godin showed, it had positive gravity, so you reverse this whole thing. As it would come down, of course, we know the material that gets into this part gets totally chewed up. So it'll get chewed up and it'll be turned into dust because this has these things inside it, right? So it'll chew it into dust. But if you happen to be right in the center of here, you might be lofted up and fall back down again. Or if there were substructures moving around, those kind of things you might expect to happen. But I definitely wouldn't want to be in this part. You'd just be churned up, right? Along with everything else. End the lies, come out and say the truth. In case you haven't noticed, I think it's time to end the charade. I really feel that now. Okay, I'm looking for any questions if anyone's got any questions. Yes. Those that then know that they have great power and choose not to use it, Alex Del Costello, will inherit the earth, right? We didn't steal this. We learnt how it works. And we didn't need any super secret government program, but it does help. It does help that they released this formally classified video, I have to say, because you can literally see it's exactly the same thing. And we know that this is, according to the observations of Sergei Godin, these are effectively compressions in the ether or decompressions in the ether, making it cold. And therefore, they're effectively nodes on a anti-gravity wave or gravity wave. I suspect that this might be pointed north and this might be pointing south. Or I would suspect there's some kind of cardinal point orientation with this structure. And I think that they know that, and that's why they chose to have this videoed from a particular angle. Yeah, I encourage everyone to get 4K downloader and download the whole channel. I know that has been done by many people, but I would encourage anyone to do that. You need about 1 terabyte to download the whole of the YouTube, MFMP's YouTube channel. Yeah, we did, Alex Del Castillo. We came about this honestly. There was literally no stealing of anything. None at all. I've been having a debate with S. Farrell about whether Tesla meant ball of fire or lightning. I think he meant ball of fire, and S. Farrell is absolutely determined to say that he chose to accidentally say something in probably his most important patent of his life. He accidentally said ball of fire when he knew how to make balls of fire. He knew what they were, and he could make them. And technology has been built on the understanding that he produced since then. But S. Farrell is absolutely convinced that it was just a misspeaking, and he actually meant lightning. So it's a disagreement. Oh, he's got another point as well. I don't know, but I don't know how Mr. Farrell, I don't know how it moves the technology towards something that's useful. If you've got an argument that moves the technology towards something that's useful, I'd be very happy to hear it. Thank you very much, Sassy. That's very kind. Very kind. Well, the thing is, ignoramus, both are plasma formations. And of course, all lightning, literally all lightning, has a ball lightning as a leader. So it literally doesn't matter. I don't care whether it's a one ball lightning, which we see in this Soviet weapons test, which I showed you earlier. Where is it? Here. This large ball lightning that was synthesized here. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it's a large ball lightning or it's normal lightning. It always has ball lightning at the front of it. Thank you, Vanilla Isis. Oh, wow, this is so cool. Cheers, guys. So, Fom Orhout says, TSG is Vajra implosive turbine. I don't know. I don't know enough about the Vajra implosive turbine to be able to be, I've not seen it operate. I've not seen it do any propulsion. I know what you say, Malcolm, but my rule is if I haven't seen it, it hasn't happened. then I can't be accused of passing on information that is just what someone else said. So that's where I stand. You know I stand in that position. I've seen stuff in your reactor that point to the fact that it could be working as described or as claimed. And, there's still tests to be done. But, I'll stick with what I know. Thank you. Yes, okay. So Malcolm is very concerned that certain people are trying to get into a position where they could either discredit or cause Malcolm some misfortune, let's put it that way. So he's moved faster on his propulsion technology and has submitted the patent today. And since it's been submitted, there's an argument as to whether that can be published. So that might happen very quick to protect the information in the same way that Ken Shoulders protected it. We're really at the end game here. FPV Angel says, don't be surprised if they say one already exists. That was the point of the MFMP. When we had our first meeting, we all agreed. Well, I said basically, this is what I would like to see happen. We hopefully will verify someone else doing the process. If we don't, maybe we can find out how to do it, and those that already know how to do it but are keeping it secret will be then forced to reveal it as Johnny Come Latelys try and, pretend that they did it earlier, but they might not have done it earlier. But like, if you don't say it before it's said, then you might as well not have done it. You're just an also-ran. It's like, don't be the third person to put a plane in the sky and say, I invented man-made flight. No, like, you're the third person, sorry. But I had this flying 5 years ago, or I had this flying 50 years ago. You didn't say it, you didn't do it, sorry, mate, right? So the idea was to play on human psychology right from the get-go and, either find someone and prove someone had done it, or try and do it ourselves with the best understanding we could, or if we couldn't do that, look like we were going to do it. But we effectively had done all three, the two more important ones. And so it's forced people into the open. And one was a mental hurdle. Can we get people over the mental hurdle that this is not impossible? All of that massive amounts of programming that had been done over probably tens of years, but at least I would say 120 years of deep, deep programming to ensure that people could not find this out. But once it's found out, it's like there were people in the Russian community that absolutely knew when I presented some stuff in 2018 what I was talking about, right? And it was only when I showed the physical evidence that had never been made public by any person before, and maybe it has never been seen before. But they were forced to reveal the Soviet energetics work that became the Bagel game and the proof thereof, and led to the understanding about the fractal toroidal moment, the phase singularity that it has at the center, the mean square radius, the phase conjugation, the non-radiating boundary, and the fact that it has effectively, it's a topological monopole. William Schwant, it's about $25 a pound or other or something in the UK to apply for a patent. So yes, you can't afford to do one patent, but if you really have something that you think works, you can always apply for it and then see if anyone is interested in it. It gives you some protection for a period of time. Ken says, ask the Chinese on a patent laws. No, they won't. And the Indians don't care either. They'll offer you a little bit of money, and if you don't take it, they'll just do it anyway. What white dots in the background on the right-hand side? What are we talking about? Don't know what you're talking about. Sorry. What is the point of showing this video, Farrell? Can you explain yourself there? Zachary, I do think this is effectively what people would have called magic in the past. It's just science, though, and ignoramus has nailed it. It's extreme efficiency. This is what nature wants to do all of the time, everywhere, all of the time. And this is Alex Castillo. This is the point. And I had a long discussion with Malcolm. I said, I think the real problem here is this is the best way to do anything you'd want to do well. I'm paraphrasing Ken Shoulders. It doesn't matter whether it's propulsion, synthesis of matter, machining of matter, energy production, all of the things that are so important to society. This is the best way to do it. And the underlying principle is nature. And you cannot patent nature. And so what they want to do is invent for each aspect of what this can do. Let's make a tunneling machine. Let's make a thing that lifts things up into space or propels things across the cosmos. We want to develop a whole story around the fact that it's some magic that isn't this stuff, like some new technology, and we'll make maths that looks very impressive and it all adds up. but it will be this technology if it's going to do it efficiently. Or if it's not this technology, it will be trying to be this technology, and it won't be as good. Earthworm Jim, I would, there will be a presentation coming out for the Wintex, and I have some really good ideas, I hope, for accelerating the development of that. I know a lot of work has been done on that with Tony Yaboni, and so things are moving ahead with that. And because we're going to be open about that, then you're going to have an opportunity to not have to reinvent the wheel. That's the aim anyway. Yeah, Victor Schauberger was credited with the observe and copy nature, but really I think that we can push that back to 500 or 600 BC with Anaximander. Anaximander was way ahead of Victor Schauberger with that kind of very specific logic to leading to scientific development. And of course, Anaximander was only looking at what humans had done before. So someone had looked at nature long before Anaximander came along. So, but it's good advice. It's certainly what helped me move from not really getting anywhere in 2015 to understanding stuff. Okay, so I'll just do a quick review. This was O-Day control, and by that I mean them not controlling us through the permanent and never-ending disease, and through the permanent and never-ending climate change, and through the permanent and never-ending wars, all of these things that require them to have a permanent and never-ending radioactive material. All of these things can be fixed. They're a choice by people that lord over us, and they use our money to control us using these phony lies, right? And they can all stop. But we have to realize that we have the power, right? We're the people that pay for this death to go on by, not caring enough, yeah? But there are technologies that will clean up and are clean at doing the things we want to do, that remove large chunks of their narrative. And they remove a lot of the reasons for war. This is one of the first things I ever said when I started working and volunteering for the project is, when you solve this, you solve basically the reasons for war. And we have the capability to support a lot of people wherever they actually really are, born and bred in high standards of living without damaging the environment, if we use it and don't abuse it, is what I'm saying. And so this structure here, I believe I agree with my friend and colleague in this long journey, Stoyan Sarg, that these are producing anti-gravity effects. Absolutely conclusively, that is what is going on. They are producing tornadoes, absolutely and conclusively. And that it is exactly and precisely
this pulverizing shock wave
the same thing.
Forms a dust pedestal which seems to follow the rising cloud, developing into the characteristic mushroom shape of a low-altitude burst. The destruction caused by a relatively low-yield weapon can result in many square miles of ruin.
Because from Sergei Godin's Searle-type work, these are standing waves, which we know the fractal toroidal structure, which this absolutely certainly will have, produces effectively, as Tom Bearden said, at the zero crossing point of the phase conjugated electromagnetic waves, you get electrogravity. This is effectively anti-gravity at these points. It's cooling, it's sucking the energy out of this, and so it is cooling it. Or rather, you could conclude that it's compressing stuff into that particular point, and so as it compresses it, it does something, or maybe it's in these points, but whatever. This is due to a gravitational effect, and because of that, we can see it bends round this structure. It does something here. We don't know whether it's going round or whatever because we can't see it, but we do know that it comes in and up here. And therefore, these things that I believe are coming down and being concentrically arranged this way are related to gravity, and they're being pulled in here. So it's highly conclusive in my view. Now, the lifting effect here, I think, is related to the pyramid. And we talked about how the water here is being lofted up with this exact same effect going on, which was replicated by Frank Polivka, and the water is extracted from material and comes out of the top. And this, I would suggest, explains the popping of a, if I can play it here, it's going to play for me, the popping of a iron sewer cover here. And so I'm more convinced than ever that the Great Pyramid works on this principle, which it was probably the greatest solid state machine that man has ever built. And it would be certainly interesting to find out what it did. And I don't think it would cost that much to get working again. And what we see here, if I go like this, and I go like this, and I drop that in here, and I drop that in there, the same thing that's going on here with this little leaf that comes out to the side, and all of this activity on this side, it's here, but it's not here. There's different things going on over here. I will maybe look at this sample and see if there are bands going through this at some point. But anyway, the fact that this just seems to work everywhere effortlessly must mean something. And so, therefore, we talked about these things with the phase conjugation of the electromagnetic waves. And I also talked very briefly about the fact that this is anti-gravity from the point of view that it is doing the same thing as is in this 1979 patent. So my friends, we do have the means to do this. We have these tools. And with that, I will say good night. Thank you hugely. I'm going to give a shout out to all of the people that donated today. That's really special. So thank you so much. Thank you again to Black Tie, incredible. Thank you to Craig, to DAC. Thank you to Daz Pizzazz. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Earthworm Jim. Really kind of you. Thank you, Sassy. Thank you, Vanilla Isis. And thank you, above all things. That really is so generous of you today. We, my friends, are at the dawn of an old age. This was known before. And so I commend to you Ode, control. Buenas noches, dobra night, noc, good night. And lastly, come clean, stop the lies, and stop the killing.